Sup gamers, Rainy Potato here with the best builds for the Runaway in Darkest Dungeon 2. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to subscribe. I post new videos every day. The Runaway is the only burn-based hero, with two pretty interesting paths and a varied kit, but unfortunately is an average hero with only one real build. Arsonist is her best path, offering burn application and crit on burn skills at the cost of damage and self-burn. While her kit provides both front and back row skills, she's best in the back, with better scaling skills and more protection for her average HP. Your kit depends on whether she's running ranks 3 or 4. She's slightly better in 3, but there are less pure rank 4 heroes in this game, so she normally ends up there in most comps. Firefly is a staple. In some runs, this will literally be the only skill I play all game. Smokescreen is arguably the best debuff in the game, and this is also an auto-equip for any build. Cauterize as well is an auto-equip. As common as Bleed is, it's nice to have a very strong off-healer. The last two skills are dependent on positioning. If you can swing rank 3, Controlled Burn is great, especially as scaling versus bosses. The rest of her skills are pretty crap. If you want to do movement stuff, you don't. Then you can slap on Ransack. It's okay as an emergency melee attack, I suppose. I always run and hide. She's fairly fragile, especially with the self-burn, so I like being able to stealth and regen on upgrade. Hearthlight is okay to strip dodge tokens, and also is an okay upgrade in situations where you'll be blinded, like against cultists, creatures, the Act 2 boss, and the Shroud. As said before, she's a back row exclusive hero who basically just spams Firefly. She's an off healer, not a main healer, so you want her paired with a healer at the least. Otherwise, she can fit with basically anyone, including movement comps. For trinkets, obviously you want to head to the Sprawl to pick up fire trinkets, and that's literally it. Of course, the Sprawl has fire resist, making this a tougher challenge than any other region, but your Arsonist should be able to make up for it with her burn application. For mastery, Firefly is a mandatory early upgrade. I'll often get it in one because frankly you're using it every round, so it certainly adds up. Smokescreen is a massive upgrade too, though I still spend most of my time on Firefly. With certain comps, however, like with Leper or Hellion DPS, Smokescreen is a core upgrade for the Vuln and combo. Otherwise, she doesn't need any more mastery, except Controlled Burn and Run and Hide for the Act boss. Speaking of Act bosses, she is good against all of them, as damage over time is always a useful tool to have. For a newer profile especially, she's one of the better investments you can make, as she doesn't really require any hero unlocks to work. Arsonist is the first path in her upgrade path, and she's one of the better back row heroes with her base kit, though with a fully unlocked profile, she falls off quite a bit. She's pretty good against all the lair bosses as well, except for Librarian, of course, where she's less than useless. Back row Runaway is the only decent build, but if you must run this mediocre HP hero up front for whatever reason, Arsonist is still the play, because you're still primarily about dealing burn damage. Up front, Runaway is best in a movement comp, with Dragonfly as your primary form of damage, being a pretty solid AoE burn, at least when it's upgraded. You pair this with Ransack to move yourself back up if necessary, and it's also a pretty useful pull, of course. Searing Strike is only really useful on combo, since the extra direct damage is sort of irrelevant with the Arsonist debuff, but I usually still keep it on if I'm not interested in moving. The last skill is between Controlled Burn and Smokescreen, both of which are acceptable choices. Burn is usually boss only for me, it's pretty slow otherwise. Smokescreen is used the rest of the time, though depending on how much your team likes combos, I often keep this up for the boss as well. Cauterize can't be used from rank 1, so I pretty much never equip it. This build sucks, since it's really not much damage at all, and she's pretty fragile up front. You mostly want this for a dancing team, where she can constantly spam Dragonfly, which is pretty good against trash mobs, though still worse than any other front row damage option. Again, you're looking purely for burn trinkets, so you're hitting up the Sprawl. Dragonfly should be an early upgrade, probably good enough for N1, and the rest is pretty mid, though Searing Strike is a useful upgrade, and of course Smokescreen is elite if you use it. This build is awful at every boss except Act 1, where it's still pretty bad, but at least your Dragonfly is still relevant. It's also quite bad against every lair boss, with the complete lack of reach. Just don't run it, to be honest. Don't even know why I wrote this. Survivor, I suppose, is the alternate build, offering you extra tokens at combat start and extra healing in exchange for losing burn application chance. In practice, this is a horrific build because she doesn't have near enough utility and offers no damage to slightly buff a situational heal. This is a movement-based path, as Ransack is your only form of damage without burn application. Obviously you equip Cauterize because that's the whole point of the path. Smokescreen is the only actual useful skill in this build, so it's a must equip. I usually round out the kit with Run and Hide, since it also receives a buff from this path, and helps you move back after Ransack. And Controlled Burn is actually a decent equip. The initial burn is affected by your debuff, but the subsequent burns aren't. In non-boss combats it's too slow though, so I usually just throw on Hearthlight. This requires exclusively a dancing team, since Runaway's only attack is Ransack, and you also need Runaway to not move herself into one where her Cauterize is gone. There's no real team comp otherwise that fits with this build. You still want a healer because Cauterize is too niche, though there's an argument for pairing Intermezzo and Survivor together so you can self-bleed, though that build just does 0 damage ever. Just don't run this. It's a bad path and only gets worse against Lair and Act bosses. Orphan path is in theory an interesting build, offering extra damage in the front ranks in exchange for burn damage, and vice versa from the back. However, it plays identical to the Arsonist build in practice, except you're also locked into rank 4 to take full advantage of the extra burn dots. For this particular build, you can take off Controlled Burn and round out your kit with Firestarter, since it gives you a free crit token. It's a pretty slow play, but I'll run this only if I have a Man-at-Arms to riposte with the burn. You scale this build the exact same way, heading to the Sprawl for burn trinkets, except you want to prioritize burn application instead, since you lose the Arsonist buff. You're also much weaker in the Sprawl initially without application, and will be basically useless again in this region, relying on a team to carry you. As said before, you really want to pair this with a Man-at-Arms to make use of Firestarter, but otherwise Orphan works with anyone, especially since she's happy in rank 4. She's still good against every boss except Librarian, but lesser so than Arsonist, usually because she lacks the extra application, and bosses usually show up with higher resists. There used to be a backdraft build where she could run front row before they nerfed her to the ground, and in theory it's still usable if upgraded to nuke back row. It requires a Firestarter on a Plague Doctor and a Mag Rain to set up, usually with an Encore Jester to make this happen faster, along with burn trinkets for your Plague Doctor, but it's much worse than just having a Hellion or Highwayman most of the time. And front row Orphan sucks in general otherwise because even with the damage boost, she just doesn't do enough damage to justify the lack of HP. Just don't try it, to be honest. Overall, Runaway is actually a pretty solid early hero with a simple build, but becomes rather boring and stale quickly, and eventually you'll find better, more versatile heroes and builds, especially since she's so dependent on trinkets to scale. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to subscribe. I post new videos every day.